Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next installment on my Newb to Warlord series. I'm Warlord Magni, and today we are going to learn about spin to win. Right. So really, this is just a tutorial on how to spin. We're going to look at the two primary variants of spinning. So there's the front spin and then the back spin. Just so everybody knows, spinning is most effective with sword and board, and that's really because of when you do a spin shot, you're exposing your back, so like the shield allows you to protect yourself more. You can spin doing like single sword and Florentine. It's not super effective from my experience. I can get away with it more in single sword than Florentine. But like I've I guess like all of the mechanics, the body mechanics, like the footwork, the setups are pretty much all the same. If you want to try doing different categories, as with sword and board, but it's really the most effective, and you get the most mileage with it in sword and board. Okay, so as I said, there's two variants. There's the front spin, and then there's the back spin. So the front spin really, or I guess what the differentiators are, is the direction that you're spinning and the setup. So with a front spin, I'm moving counterclockwise. Typically, my right foot is forward, my sword foot is forward. It'll be flipped really quick. If you're a lefty, it's going to be flipped. Okay. So with the front spin, I'm going counterclockwise this way. Okay. With the back spin, I'm still right-handed. I'm spinning that way, right? So with the front spin, I'm hitting with the sword first, and then I'm spinning out to disengage. Whereas with the back spin, I'm spinning first, and then I'm hitting. Okay? So we're going to look at, go through each spin case by case, and talk about like how to learn them and all of that good jazz. So typically, I'm going to use everything with the sword and board. For demonstration purposes, I'm not going to use the board just so you can see what I'm doing easier. But I'm going to have Talion be my opponent. Bring that over here just in the event that I need it. Thanks. All right. So first up, we're going to talk about backspin. So with the backspin, typically, right, I mentioned my board foot is forward, right? I have my board, boom. What I'm trying to hit is I'm trying to hit that hip. Okay? Maybe you get the arm, but really the hip is where you're shooting for. If you're a lefty, if you're lefty fighting lefty, this is all the same. It's just mirrored. Okay? Looking at you, DX. Okay. So additionally, when we're setting up the backspin, really with spins, setups are everything. Okay? So we're looking at what our stance is, what we're faking, how we're setting up the shot, and what our range and our footwork are. With the spins, yeah, with the spins, right? You want with the backspin, you want your board leg forward. Typically, you want to be in mid B, right? So if you don't know about range, go look at my range class, range and footwork. I want to be mid B, so able to hit my opponent in like the bottom 6 inches of my sword. Because when I spin, I want to be able to hit here. If I'm in C range, right, so I'm now just like barely able to touch my opponent, I can kind of be able to do it. But if Talion backs out, which a lot of people are going to back out on when they see a spin, I'm going to woof, right? So typically what I'm doing when I'm fighting and I'm going to do a spin is I'll be here. Oh, you were supposed to back out. Did I just hit you with the core? Hey, don't do that. Sorry. All right, now we're going to back up, right? Right. So then I still hit him in the like last 8 inches. Okay, so you want to be in mid B range. Let's see. Are we ready? When you're doing the spin itself, the momentum that you're getting is typically from twisting your shoulders and twisting at the hips, right? When you go to spin, let her rip. Don't do any of these like, no, like go for the spin. If you go too slow, you're gonna get tagged in the back. That's how you die. Additionally, when you're throwing the spin, especially on the back spin, don't like what I see. And this is I did this when I started to learn how to spin. Is I would like throw it out here, and I would throw my arm out like this. You can do that, but if you know anything about physics and conservation of angular momentum, the more mass that you have tucked in, the faster you go. So when I do the spin, I'm locking my sword at my hip to spin, right? So I'm doing that, or I'm extending out just a little bit and locking my elbow like kind of on my hip, okay? Let's see. All right, so now we're going to talk about really the setups with the shots. So here I am, we're sword and board. I want to get that hip. So for the setups that we're going to do, I want to be board foot forward. So you need to first transition into board foot forward. I typically fight sword foot forward. What people will often look for in somebody that is going to spin is they're going to look at that switch. So you either need to figure out how to switch and be like inconspicuous, or you need to actively like do stance changes so it's not as obvious. Okay, so I mean, also some people just naturally fight board foot forward more often, and that's okay. So then you already have a leg up. So transitioning into board foot forward, again, you need to be in mid B range. So planning that out, right? If Talion and I are fighting, often when I take a step forward into my opponent's space, they'll often step out, right? So sometimes it's these little half steps that you need to get into range. I often, when I'm trying to set up the shots, I'm throwing up top, right? I want my opponent to think that everything's up here and drift their guard up, right? I want more access to that hip. You can also do this by throwing on the outside, right? So I'm getting Talion to move his board and show me his hip more, right? So what I'll do typically is I'll throw, spin, okay? And so really what I was doing is throw here. This is a relatively safe opener. If Talion returns, okay, I can block, up top, cross, throw. One thing to keep in mind whenever you're throwing spins is when you move into it, your stance is going to change. So if I'm board foot forward and I backspin, step forward with it, right? So now I am sword foot forward, okay? You're not like you're not necessarily trying to do that. I wouldn't recommend jumping because you can like eat shit. Right? So I would typically do the step with it. Okay. You can also lead up or set up into the spin, right? I'm naturally a sword foot fighter, a sword foot forward fighter, and I can step throw into the spin. Right? That's a really easy way. It will work so against upper tier fighters. Typically, they'll recognize the footwork change and they'll be like, "Oh, I need to get out of range." Especially with me, since I'm like a pretty dynamic, far moving opponent. Typically, when people see me coming into range, like, I would rather not. Right? Additionally, with the um, a couple of other little variants in how you can do the spin. You don't always have to step forward with it. You can step out. The benefit of this is that when you do spin, you get a little bit more access to the inside. But you have to be careful because as you're here, do it on the other side. Right, dead. Boom. So just be conscientious of that. But what you can do, come over a little bit more. Right, so I can throw. Right, so what I did there is I led up to a shot on this side, giving the impression of I'm going to move this way. I take the step this way. I'm giving my opponent two different pieces of information of where I'm going, and then I spin, right, to get the kill shot. I mean, spins are great. They're like super flashy. That's pretty much how you do the backspin. I guess a couple of little caveats on, or I guess variations as well in the way that people do the spin is in the load up. So when I do the spin, my feet are like all in a line. Hopefully everybody can see this. What I've seen other people do in learning is they'll cant themselves. So they're now like loaded up as a spring. I've seen people do this. And I'm like, hey, I know what's going to happen. And then they spin. And I'm like, no. Right. So the reason why I wouldn't recommend doing this like spring load up is one, I'm very unstable. So if I'm like this and Talion decides to say, hey, I'm in your space now, I'm really fucked. I have to take a momentary second to reposition myself and disengage from, or like abort from the spin, right? And this is really easy to notice, okay? When is a good time to throw the spin shot in this case with the backspin? It's really any time you can get your opponent's guard to be up top, right? And of course, like you need your range to be fairly close. Not a range where I'm like here, come this way a little bit, right? Not a, because if I spin, I don't have anywhere to go into, right? I need to be at this like mid B range so I can step into that shot, okay? So that's really what I have with the backspin. One big tip that I can give, just no matter whatever spin you're doing, when you go, let it rip. Like, just don't be afraid to throw it. And make sure that you're pushing your sword down and low and close to your body. What I see a lot of people do commonly when they start to learn how to throw the spin, whether it's the front spin or the back spin, especially the back spin, is that they'll throw like this, right? So what does that look like? Right? Get hit in the face. So, right, you're not thrown out, you're thrown low. Also, when you throw, I typically have the sword pointed up. So when I spin back, I'm coming up into the juicy bits. If I'm flat, okay, that's okay. If I'm down, I'm typically going to hit a leg. You also have to be careful of how low you throw it. Even this, right, I'm going to hit a leg, but if I have it tilted upwards, I may be able to gain access to the hip. Just be conscientious of that, and it's something you're going to have to tailor and work out. Whenever you're learning spins, start slow. Do everything super slow. Right, here I am, step. Right, I'm not moving my sword. I'm turning, step, right, to throw. Go at 10% speed, then build it up to 50, so on and so forth, and then eventually go to full speed. All right, so that's all I have on backspin. Now we're going to talk about front spin. So the front spin, typically where I'm aiming is I'm aiming for the arm, for the hip, and then like for the shoulder. Okay, with the footwork, I'm now sword foot forward, and with the range, in this case, I'm typically at C range, or like at the mid C to B range. Okay, or sorry, I'm at the transition from C to B, and maybe a little bit mid B. Okay, and so front spins are really great for disengagements, right? Because now I'm stepping back out. And remember, whenever you do a spin, you're doing a stance change. So here I am in an offensive guard. I front spin out. I'm now in a defensive guard. And so if I do that with Talion, back up just a little bit. Thanks. Right? I've now gained space, and I'm ready for him to engage. I'm in a defensive position for it. With front spins, you're primarily using your shoulders and your torso to get that movement, and then like you swing your legs back or forward to get that additional movement. With front spins, you're actually shooting the sword out, whereas in the backspin, you're tucking the sword in. With the front spin, boom, right? I'm like throwing the sword to get the shot, right? So there's a lot of different like areas that I can target. I kind of already mentioned, and really how that's gonna change is what is available to you and how you set up the shot. So I'm gonna first talk about setups, and then talking about like the different sort of options you can play and where you can hit. Right? So the main setup with a front spin is, again, you need your positioning to be at this more like distance range. Okay? Additionally, trying to be slightly offline. So when you do this, don't take big steps, right? Because the bigger the step or the bigger the movement, the more likely your opponent is going to adjust, right? So typically it'll be, and this is never a stagnant sort of situation in an actual fight, right? We're rotating. You're actually supposed to rotate with me, right? We're rotating. Okay, now I'm going to slow it down and then do that shot. I didn't do the full spin, but right, I need to get Talion to be a little bit off, or I need to be a little bit offline to get access to Talion's arm, shoulder, or hip. Okay, that is like the main key. Alternatively, you can do a pump, right? You can pump to the side to get access, or like I throw here, and then I want like my opponent to throw, block, and then cross out, right? As sort of like a riposte. You're going to have to work on the timing really, really well, because if I throw and then I throw it immediately, maybe I get hit, right? Maybe I get tagged. So I have to throw, wait actually for the contact, or start to throw and make sure I block, throw as it's coming in. Okay? I typically use this front spin for tagging the arm, but you can, like I'm tagging the forearm area, but you can get up above by like reaching over and out. Like with the backspin, I can step over and out. To me, that feels a little bit less natural, because I'm now taking a step this way. I'm exposing my body a little bit, right? So if we go in line, I take this step over. Now Talion actually has access to my arm a little bit more than I would like. Okay, and then I can get it. It's a risk I don't like taking. But, everybody's different. I just want to show everyone the sort of options you have. Say you get really good at tagging that shot, right at the arm. if you get a little bit closer, now you get access to the hip. One thing that I like to do, right, this is a disengagement shot. We're actually, we're fighting in this mid B, we're grinding. Hit that hip. Again, you want your opponent's guard to be up high, so you get access to the hip shot in that case. Let's see. There's another variant. You do a cross shot with this. I don't really like this, but it's not always about what I like. So what you do is you like pump down and then get the shoulder. Did I hit your shoulder? Yeah, right. So let me flip it over. Right, so you pump out. And so I'm taking the step over to act like, I'm going to do money, but I'm not actually doing money. I'm boom. It's super flashy. It looks really beautiful. It's really high risk, high reward. More chances than not, I've hit my opponent in the face when doing that shot. So just be prepared to whack your opponent in the face. But if they're like your underbelts, go ahead and do it. Fuck it. Yeah. So those are kind of like the main times I'll use the front spin. Also, this is the main spin that I do when I'm single sword, right? Because this is a really good disengagement shot, where you're like, boom, okay, here I am, and you're now armed, right? Other times to throw this shot, right? Anytime, it is really a disengagement shot entirely, because I'm putting space on that spin, right? I'm not, whereas I'm disengaging here, whereas in the backspin, right, my stance is switched. I'm coming into my opponent, and now I'm ready to engage because I'm closer. Does it make sense? Okay. So that's kind of all I have for front spin. Last thing that I'm going to talk about is a couple of little combos to do, or ways that you can add this organically into your fighting style. So really what I do, I like to throw kind of a flurry of blows when I'm fighting, right? So I'm throwing multiple shots. Again, you always have to make sure your footwork is right. When I was starting to learn spins, I would have to be like, okay, I want to throw a backspin, so I need to make sure I'm board foot forward before, I check that box. Okay, let's just try it out, see what happens. Right. So, again, right, backspin, make sure that you have a little bit more distance. Front spin, you can be up close, engaging. Again, with the combos, really, I'll throw 2 shots or maybe a couple pumps in there, or throw, or throw. Right, that's for the front spin. It's typically the same exact thing from the backspin, but I'm doing it from further out, right? Because I'll go throw. I'm just beating you up at this point. Right. Once you start getting spins down and landing, your opponents are going to start being like, hey, this guy spins. I know what to look for. So that's when you pull out the trap card and you start doing fake spins. And the fake spins are the best. Fake spins work the best with the backspin, because what you do is you go, huh, you just start to pump and you keep the board in place. You keep the board in place because if they throw, board's still here. Okay? If you don't, dead. Right? So, throw. And typically, when people are starting to realize you're throwing spins, they're going to throw a cross or something, or a straight chop. And what I will do is I'll wait for the response on what side of the board it comes from. It's going to take time and skill to learn that. Or you just say, or I wait for what side of the board it's thrown on, and then that tells me where I'm going to counter. Because that's where it's going to be open, right? If Talion throws on the cross, I know to counter straight across. If it's a chop, I know I need to come in this angle, right, to chop the arm. Or get a cross on the shoulder. Alternatively, if you're like just learning this out, just pick a spot. Just say, I'm going to fake spin, and I'm going to go for the board side and see what happens. And that's totally okay. So that's the fake spin. Love fake spins. They're great. And then people will often be really pissed off because it's like, oh shit, did you just kill me with a fake spin? Be like, yeah, it was great. Here's my number. The last spins combo, or like, this is kind of a famous spin combo, is the 5-1-2. This is like a Delos combo. And so this is a backspin followed by a front spin. So here we are. I backspin into you, and then I front spin out. That is the whole 5-1-2. It's pretty cool, right? Like, you're like, oh, boom. It's 2 quick shots. I've seen like Jamie do this, where he throws the backspin, boom, and then he'll like play with you a little bit, and then like he'll I didn't explain that very well. Sorry. He'll do the backspin, throw. He's not expecting to land on the backspin. He's expecting to get you to go, oh, okay, what do I do now? Right? And then now Jamie he'll often like throw fakes, wait for you to get your guard high, and then backspin out on the attack. It works. I've gotten a few people with it. It looks super pretty. So that's really cool. But 5-1-2, fun combo. But overall, spins I think are really fun. Don't do it with carbon fiber because you break the swords. Check out that Amtgard video where I snap my sword on Warlord Morpheus's arm. Great time. But yeah, that's kind of all I have for spinning. Big main tips, right? Like, work yourself up to speed. Focus on form, focus on arm placement. And then that's how you're really going to be able to like stair step your way up to being able to how to use these spins properly. And then it's just going to take like some practice learning when the right times to implement them and when not to do it. But that's all I have for today. Thank you all for your time and attention. Thanks to Talion. Good job letting me just beat the shit out of you. But with that, thanks guys, and I'll see you on my next installment to my Newb Warlord.